What's up, guys? Welcome back for another update of The Bazaar. I know it's been a really long time since I did the last one, but I wanted to make sure that I waited enough time between updates to make sure that I had enough new information to show you and, more stuff to go off of. So, since we last spoke, there have been a lot of developments. The game's basically, we keep iterating on the build that we have to work with. We have what's called a networking build right now, so, it allows us to just play matches against each other online, and we kind of use that to test new mechanics, new cards. And we're trying to hone in on certain gameplay mechanics, how we want the economy to work, just really high-level questions. We're at a point right now where we have a lot of options when it comes to, the way that players make money to buy cards with in the game, the way that monsters work, the way that rewards work, the way that classes feel. And right now what we're doing is we're tweaking all these things to try to find what's really an ideal fit. So when we last left off in the last video, I talked a lot about kind of some of those mechanics that we wanted to test out here in the future. And I have no idea why my trash can keeps opening. It's only supposed to open when you say open can, and yet it just keeps opening when I'm mid-sentence for no reason. It's really annoying. It bugs me. Place is haunted. Yeah, so when we last left off, there was a bunch of stuff we were going to try, and now we have tried some of it, and I kind of wanted to tell you guys how that's felt and kind of what we want to do moving forward. Before I get into that, I kind of want to show you some art and kind of the direction that things have been going. So we decided to focus on the wizard class primarily right now, and then we'll be working on the werewolf class right after. And those are going to be the first two classes for the vertical slice, which is going to be the first polished build of the game that has all the bells and whistles and the art and the 3D modeling and animations. We don't have any of those things right now, but when we do, the two classes that people are going to be playing with are the wizard and the werewolf. So yeah, without further ado, this is kind of the direction some of the sketches have been going. It's Alchemist Swan, Battle Mage, Blade. These names are subject to change. It's just like kind of the idea of the card. This is Blizzard. I really like how this one looked. One of the things you can kind of start noticing in these sketches is that the new wizard character is starting to be more and more prominent and featured in all of the artwork, right? The idea is that you're playing as this wizard, and when you play Blizzard, this wizard casting Blizzard. So it's not just, some random Blizzard spell. It's like, you're causing it, your character's doing it. It should feel less like a Hearthstone card and more like an ability from a League of Legends character. A lot of these art cards will reflect that. Here's just a new burn placeholder thing for the burn curse. It's vaporize or distillation. Yeah. We got Ice Age, again, wizard character being featured here. Inferno, a very interesting card. This one's actually referencing Pyroxene Tablet, which is another card in the game. That's kind of what these stones are based off of. Some cards are starting to kind of link together. Talisman and Disruption. I like how this one looks a lot. Tempest Wraith, the Infernal. This is an interesting card. A lot of people have been bringing up doing more alternative win conditions. And, even though I want a player's health to be like the main way that they die, there's a lot of ways to set somebody's health to 0. So the Infernal is a card we're experimenting with right now. It has a very low drop rate. It only shows up in the late game. And it's a giant monster that shows up in your store, and it's very hard to kill. It has 20 health. But if you kill it, your reward is you put 666 burns into your opponent's deck, which is pretty much always going to be enough to win the game after a turn or two. It's going to completely shut them out. But it doesn't immediately kill them, but it does, reward you for being able to kill a really big monster quickly. And, your opponent can interact with it by getting it out of the store as well. Let's see, we got Thunderstorm. Again, the wizard's going to be featured there. I know they're all like blurry right now. This is just like the rough sketch before the detail comes in. We got Tsunami. It's a late game legendary spell, very low drop rate. Vaporize, more common spells. You guys can kind of get the idea. The wizard's being featured in a lot of these. We've done a few more sketches of the werewolf. I don't know how many of these I showed you in the last video. Yeah, the idea is that we have this character getting fleshed out a little bit more. Pretty atypical for a female character, right? She's very, very strong, very angry, but not in like not the usual way. And it's going to be more of like a hunter character, Beastmaster, tames creatures, hunts them, things like that. That's kind of the flavor that we're going to be going with this. But a lot of traditional hunter themes when it comes to the cards. But yeah, I'm excited for this character. I think, getting it fleshed out a lot more will be pretty interesting to see where that goes. We got Zap over here, one of the earliest spells added to the game. So yeah, overall, just getting more sketches down, and as we get into the next phase of development with the vertical slice, that's when we're going to start really getting these art pieces more detailed and colorized. And as soon as I have some progress on that, I'll make sure I show you guys. When it comes down to the mechanics, when we last left off, we were working with a library of cards that was really dependent on the combo mechanic that I talked about. And that's something that's really similar in other deck building games, where you'd basically make like 4 types of cards, and when you draw two cards together that have the same type, they both get like a bonus, they both get stronger. And that introduces a lot of RNG with draw order. It's not super fun to deck build with, because as soon as you have like one card of a faction, you just want to get a second card of that faction and a third card of that faction. So we kind of wanted to, make the gameplay a little bit more in-depth than that. I wanted to move away from that combo mechanic. With that being said, I put a lot of work and a lot of time into that combo mechanic, put a lot of work and time into the library of cards for that mechanic. Because keep in mind, for every card that we designed, it wasn't just like a cost of the card and the effect that we made. We had to include all of these parameters, like the turns that the card spawns in. When you have to do so many different parameters just to add a card to the game, it ends up being really time intensive to make a library of 100 cards for a class. So currently, we're still using that library of cards because we haven't gotten to redoing the entire thing yet. But as you guys will see in the kind of accompanying video to this one, where I play some games, the networking build, the game still sort of manages to play fine, even with that old library of cards that isn't really in line with the new economy system or the new mechanics yet. I mentioned that we wanted to mess around with the status effect mechanic last time, and that's something we did add to the game. There aren't many cards that use it in the current pool of cards that we're testing with, but the mechanic is programmed into the game engine, and that's really the important thing. So we can start designing a lot of cards that incorporate status effects. So for those of you guys who don't remember how those work, what we're going to be doing is allowing you to add bad cards to your opponent's deck, like let's say a burn. And when they draw the burn, they take damage. But as long as they own the burn card, like as long as it's in their deck or their discard pile, as long as they own it somewhere, they're considered to be burning. And if they're burning, then that's going to open up a lot of bonuses on certain cards that you have. So, it's not necessarily like a faction dependent synergy. It's going to be more about like putting the right status effects on your opponent and then synergizing other cards with those status effects. And I think it's just going to open up a lot of design space for us, and it'll be kind of interesting to see how we can play with that more. And we're going to be showing the status ailments on the characters visually. So like behind the hero portrait, maybe the background will start burning if you're on fire, or maybe the portrait will freeze over, if you're frozen or something like that. So these are all things we're still experimenting with, and I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. Beyond that, the big thing we've overhauled is the economy system. So originally, the first build we started with was a really traditional deck building game approach, where you have 10 cards in the deck that make money or give you attack, and you would draw 5 cards a turn, and then you would use this money to buy stuff. And this had a few issues. The money that you got was really inconsistent, right? Because sometimes you just drew like a bunch of coins, sometimes you didn't draw enough. It affected whether you could power spike by buying an expensive card. The other issue is like from a flavor standpoint. It doesn't make sense if I have like 10 copper coins in my starting deck. How can I keep spending the same copper coins to buy stuff? Right? Coins are one-time use. You don't get them back after you use them. The other issue is it was just kind of boring to play a bunch of coin cards one by one. It's less fun than playing like weapons and attacking things. The other issue is just being unable to efficiently use your money. Like let's say you drew like 5 coins in a turn, you have 5 money, but all you can buy is a card that costs 4 or a card that costs 2. So you don't really have a clean way of using all of your money, and it feels like it introduced an element of RNG where you like didn't necessarily control how much mana you were able to spend. And like in theory, having a hero power is one of those things that helped offset this. In practice, it felt a lot better to have persistent money that you permanently had access to. And if we gave people persistent money, if your money didn't empty at the end of the turn, we couldn't keep giving them 5 coins a turn. It just ended up being too many resources to work with when you can save money between turns. Overall, the persistent monies felt really good. It's felt better than traditional card games, traditional deck building games, that is. It doesn't make you feel obligated to buy something bad just to use your money that turn. That's a really good feeling. It really lets you be more selective about what you want your deck to look like and how you want to craft it, rather than feeling like you're kind of at the mercy of the stuff that shows up in your stores. And the fact that the stores refresh during every day cycle, and the fact that now the neutral monsters change during every night cycle, makes it feel like, okay, I only have to wait 1 turn in order to get a new stores available to me and buy new stuff, and I'll have more money to work with by waiting. So it's just opened up more options for players. The persistent monies felt really good. One thing we're trying to really understand more right now is kind of the relationship between the size of your starting deck and how quickly you shuffle. Because in a deck building game, since you acquire cards straight to your discard pile, one of the main things that kind of determines how the game plays out is how often you shuffle. Because like if I buy a card, you have to calculate like how many turns you're going to shuffle before you can draw it, and it kind of affects your gameplay. And it's really something that's hard to nail down because there's all these variables that go into it, right? We have a mechanic in the game that's called brittle, which basically means, when you play a card, it's one-time use. And we've tried adding like 3 copper coins into the starting deck for players, which are brittle, right? So you play the coin, it gives you 1 money, and then it disappears. So you can't keep playing the same coin. But again, you run into the issue there where like if you start with a 10-card deck, you play 3 of your brittle coins, all of a sudden you have like a 7-card deck, and you're reshuffling much faster. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's something we'll have to play with more. But one focus of ours right now is really trying to drill down like how quickly do we want players to be shuffling through their deck, especially in the early game. Because we want players to be cognizant of the importance of deck size. We want them to work to manage the size of the deck rather than just handing everybody like a really thin deck of cards right out of the gate. Overall, it's just something we'll have to play with a lot to really get the numbers right on, but I think we're going in the right direction. We're making progress there. The other big fundamental change that I want to work on is getting rid of the Purgatory Zone. And I didn't talk about this too much in the gameplay videos I recorded for you this time, but you'll kind of see it. It's the green teal box on the left side above the player deck. And that's kind of the zone that cards go into after you play them. So the idea is like, if I play a sword card this turn, it doesn't just go straight to my discard pile. I play my sword card and it goes to that Purgatory Zone, or whatever you want to call it. And then at the end of the turn, all those cards that were played in the Purgatory Zone, then they go to the discard pile. And the reason for this working this way is so that you can't just like go infinite and play the same sword card over and over and over again by like redrawing the 2 cards in your deck. Those infinite loops are kind of something we want to be careful to avoid. So I think a big part of the reason that there's a high risk of going infinite right now is just because the density of cantrips in the game is really high. Like there's a lot of cards that draw an additional card when they're played. As we expand the design space and introduce more mechanics into the game, we'll kind of have the luxury of introducing new unique cards without just needing to slap on the effect of drawing a card onto them. Because like at the end of the day, when in the early builds, when all we can do is affect attack and money and drawing cards, like a third of the cards are going to draw cards, right? Like you want a variety of mechanics, and that's one of the 3 that you have to work with. So you're naturally going to have a lot of cards that do that. But yeah, the idea moving forward is to kind of cut back on those. One thing we've thought about when it comes to playing the game is just kind of the tedium behind playing low impact cards. It's like when you start the game, you start with a bunch of 1-attack weapons in the current build that we have. And let's say that you want to kill a monster that has 3 health in order to get some money. Well, like you're killing the monster, so you have to drag your weapons out one by one 3 times just to kill like a basic starting monster, even though you already know you're killing it. This is something that we can maybe introduce shortcuts for, like maybe you just double-click the monster and then the weapons automatically play from hand. Maybe we introduce like a play all button or something less elegant like that. But, it's worth considering, should we maybe limit the amount of cards that a player can play per turn? That would also kind of balance the card draw issue, right? Like the thing about a game like Slay the Spire is that even if you draw your entire deck in Slay the Spire, it's good, but it doesn't really matter because you're limited to how many cards you can play because of the mana system. Whether we introduce a mana system to our game or whether we just put a hard cap on how many cards players can play, or whether we just lower the amount of cards players are drawing per turn. These are all kind of different levers we're considering moving and kind of seeing how it affects the game. But right now it's a very experimental stage. As much as I want to give you guys like a GDC talk where I say, hey, this was the specific problem, here's how we fixed it. Instead, I'm just going to kind of ramble and give you an update on the things we're thinking about and kind of how they play out. I will say my issue with the Purgatory Zone, to kind of get back to that, is that I didn't like just the feel of it. It was very unintuitive that your cards just kind of like are put into this holding zone temporarily before the end of the turn. And it would just feel a lot cleaner if they went straight to discard when you played them. It also opens up a lot of play skill opportunity because you can kind of make sure that you play your good card and make sure it's in your discard before you draw the last card of your deck and initiating a shuffle. I hope this all kind of makes sense for you guys. This is kind of where we're at right now. These are all the things we're trying to nail down. Really, the next step is redoing the entire library of cards and starting to build out the werewolf class. Those are the priorities. Right now, like I said, the cards are built around that combo mechanic, and now I'm going to completely scrap that old library of cards, redo it from scratch, and try to price things appropriately for the new economy system where you start with 0 money. Introduce more neutral monsters, and especially introduce more monsters for the player stores. The density of monsters was very low before. It was only like 10% of the cards in a class were monsters. And the reason for that was you used to start the game with just 10 coins, so you didn't have weapons out the gate. Now that we do have some weapons to start with, I think introducing monsters early on will be very effective. And, in fact, I wouldn't mind having, like, let's say, a third of the cards being monsters or something like that. So I'm going to work on redoing all of that. Outside of that, we want to work on removing Purgatory. We want to make sure that the new library of cards is going to have much fewer cantrips and fewer draw effects in general. And that's going to give us a feel for, whether removing Purgatory is something we can do or whether it opens up the risk of a player just going infinite too much, too quickly. I think for the most part that covers high-level stuff we've been focusing on. I just really wanted to say thank you guys all for the support so far. And I really wanted to mention that playthebazaar.com, it's up, it's live now. It doesn't just redirect to the Indiegogo page anymore. So if you want to check that out, if you want to support the game, if you want to double up on your money for in-game currency ahead of time and support the development, if you want to get access to the beta, most importantly, you can do that all on playthebazaar.com. And I really want to say just a big thank you to the people that have supported already. It does mean a lot. It's helping us keep the game moving forward and developed. And we're really excited with how the project's progressing and want to make sure that we give you guys the best product that we can. We have E3 coming up pretty soon in about a week and a half. I have a lot of meetings lined up for that. A lot of them sound very promising, so I'm going to hope that can help us get the whole thing funded or at least part of the way there and, maybe help find a publishing partner or just explore other options. There's really a lot you can do with a game in this day and age when it comes to self-publishing or the platforms that you put it on. There's a lot of opportunity. So we just kind of want to explore all the options and make sure that we find one that's true to the game and we find one that makes sense for this kind of title. Overall, it's been moving really quickly. Happy to see all the progress with it. I'll do my best to kind of do more updates for you guys, and I think what I'm going to do moving forward is, at the very least, do like more videos, but maybe they'll be like shorter, right? Maybe I do like 15-minute videos if I don't have as much content to share. And I think really once we get into the swing of things for the vertical slice, we'll have a lot of visual things to show you guys and a lot of animations and 3D effects and feedback mechanisms. And I already have a lot of thoughts going into that stage of development, and I think that'll be a really fun area to talk about, and we'll have a lot of cool stuff to show for that part of it. So right now, it's mostly game design work. It's behind-the-scenes stuff. It's a lot of spreadsheets. So, it's aside from some sketches, it's hard for me to show you guys stuff that's very visually appealing. One other mechanic I wanted to mention, just as it came to mind right now, that we're testing is giving every monster in the player stores taunt. Because in a game like this, you can basically put some weapons in your deck and you can just start going face right away. And we want to make sure that that's not the optimal strategy. We want to make sure that there's a trade-off when you decide you want to go face. We want to make sure that you're forced to interact somewhat with monsters along the way to the point where you start doming your opponent. We think giving every monster taunt is one way to do that. It's something we're testing out right now. It does get a little frustrating sometimes. Let's say you play a fireball spell in one of your stores, and as you're targeting your fireball spell, the card that replaces the fireball in the store is a taunt monster. Now you have to fireball that monster when you thought you had lethal. And that can be really frustrating too, because it's like taunt minions getting rolled out of a piloted shredder, Yeah, it's something to think about. We'll see if that's a mechanic that'll stay in there long term. I've definitely gotten annoyed with it once in a while, but overall it does encourage more minion interaction. And yeah, I'm also just gonna look more at the way that we place monsters on stores. Right now, when you cover up an opponent's store, it kind of replaces the card under it. So even after you clear the ice wall or whatever the blocker card was, there will be a new card under that. And that's something that can be frustrating sometimes, but, I also want to think about what if, look, when it comes to the Bazaar, from day one, the expectation was that you don't control monsters in this game like you do in every other card game. The thing is, controlling monsters is pretty fun sometimes. So I want to see how we can do that within the confines of the game and, let players control their own monsters. I think there's a way to do it. We might have to let players attack their opponent's monsters, which would be a fairly big change. But yeah, these are all the kinds of things we're thinking about right now and just the kind of areas we want to explore. Really, it's just going to take a lot of hours of playtesting and really getting a feel for what's fun, what's not. Yeah, just wanted to say thanks again for the support, guys. I know it's a bit of a rambly video, but I hope some of it was interesting for you. Let me know your thoughts, especially after you check out the networking demo, like the gameplay videos. Yeah, I'd love to just hear the first stuff that comes to your guys' mind. Be gentle. I'm not saying it's a fun game right now. It's still very early stage. The gameplay stuff I wanted to show is not to show off gameplay. It was just to kind of show you guys the process of developing and kind of what we're working with right now. Still, anything comes to mind, I'd love to hear and read about. If you're not talking about the Bazaar over on the subreddit, I highly recommend you guys join that. I do my best to respond to as many messages as I can on that. So r/playthebazaar on Reddit, Play the Bazaar on Twitter, Play the Bazaar. I think we have Instagram. I don't even know. Playthebazaar.com, most importantly, for that beta access. Jump in, read about it, support the game, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.